Hello, and welcome back to another video at the University of Michigan Museum of Zoology CT Data and Segmentation tutorial series. Today, we're going to be talking about segmenting in volume graphics. My name is Ramon Nagesan. I am a zoology research specialist and the CT lab manager at the University of Michigan Museum of Zoology. If you would like to learn more about our museum, please go ahead and visit our website at the link shown on screen. You can learn all about our collections and what some of the things that we have going on are. Today, in this video, I'm going to introduce you to some of the segmentation tools. We're going to talk about specifically the draw tool and the region growing tool. And essentially, this is going to be done as a walkthrough for each of the two tools. Now, I do want to point out that volume graphics have a wide range of tools available to use for segmentation, but this video is only going to be concentrating on our workflow at the University of Michigan. If you want a full in-depth view of all of the potential options that you may have or may need from volume graphics, please go ahead and visit their website and consult their user manual. So really quickly, before we kind of get going, I do want to talk a little bit about what segmentation is. So in our previous videos, we used this data set here that you can see on screen. It is a mammal, and we set up basically the 3D model so that we can start working with it. If you'd like to, if you have not seen that video, I highly recommend you check that out because it will introduce you to several of the tools that I'm just going to be using in this video here. So importantly, segmentation is taking these two-dimensional images, so these cross sections of our CT scan data set, and creating them into a 3D model. Now here in my 3D view, you can see that I already have a 3D specimen showing, but what this is showing me is just all of the bones thresholded to be visible as a surface. And if I use my rendering screen over here, I can change that kind of pretty easily, and I can see more or less of the specimen as it was scanned. And as you can see here, essentially I'm thresholding by density. So as I move this vertical tab over to the right, only the higher density portions of the data set remain visible. If I move it over to the left, only the lower density portions of the CT scan become rendered as a 3D model. Now, segmentation is a very powerful tool because it will allow you to take this sort of just rendered surface and pull out particular bones or elements that you may be interested in looking at further. And actually, once you have something segmented, you can then take those individual elements and 3D print them, do a morphometric analysis on them, and a whole variety of things if you should wish to do that. So volume graphics does have a couple tools that will allow us to do this, but importantly, a few things that I'm going to point out that you should have active right now. So first, you want to ensure that you have your specimen thresholded to a point that you can see it. Second, you want to make sure everything has been registered, so as we showed in the previous video. And then third, we're going to be using the navigation cursor as I introduced in the previous video. So this navigation cursor will essentially allow us to move through the specimen quite easily so that we can select particular points of anatomy that we are going to be interested in segmenting today. So I will be using two segmentation tools, as I talked about in my introduction, the region growing tool and the drawing tool. So to access these tools, what we need to do is navigate to the Select tab on the top left-hand corner. We're going to go into Selection Modes. And then here you will see a number of different tools. So today, like I mentioned, we're only going to be looking at draw and region grow. All of these tools do have a appropriate application for segmentation, but for biological specimens such as this one, we're really only going to need the draw and the region growing tool. And so those are the two that we're going to focus on today. So for today, I'm going to start with the drawing tool because firstly, I think the drawing tool is the best tool for this sort of work, as it allows you to have the most precision. And secondly, I think really with the drawing tool, you get the most freedom as well. We'll go into the region growing tool shortly after that. So first thing that I like to do is find the portion of anatomy that I want to segment first, and then highlight that and zoom into that area as best I can in all the 3D views, or all the 2D views, sorry. So as I mentioned before, we're going to navigate to that section. So we will use the navigation cursor, so a control click. So here we're going to be looking at the elbow of this particular specimen's arm. So as I mentioned, we can either find that view in 2D or we can find that view in 3D. So I'm going to do it from 3D point first, so control click, and you can see it has navigated me to the elbow in all three of my two-dimensional views. So importantly, you want to make sure that you're relatively zoomed in on the area of anatomy that you will be segmenting, as you want to ensure that you are only creating one ROI at a time. So ROI. An ROI is a region of interest. When you create your segmentation, so each element that you segment, so say we want to do the humerus here separate from the ulmen radius, each of those, however we want to divide them up, will become a region of interest, or an ROI. And those ROIs will then be listed here on the scene tree on the right-hand screen, on right-hand side of your screen. And they will each be nested beneath your data set here. So first we're going to use the draw tool. So I'm going to hit select, selection modes, and then go to draw. When I click on draw, you will see a little tab popping up. This tab has the different tools or the different options for your draw tool. Now the first one is the radius. You can see actually when I click the draw tool, a little round yellow sphere has appeared in all of my screens. You'll also note in the 3D view the little yellow sphere floating around. Now this is my drawing pen, I suppose, or my paintbrush in my screen. So I can click and draw wherever I want. But a few things first. You can adjust the radius of it by clicking next to where it says radius, increase that up and down. You can increase smoothing or decrease smoothing. I usually have that set to 0. You can also draw in 2D. So what I'll show you, I mean by that is when you use the draw tool, you can either draw a single slice at a time in 2D, as you can kind of see, or you can draw in 3D, so with this sphere. Now, I personally think that the 3D drawing tool is the more powerful tool, as it allows you to work through your segmentation quite a bit faster than you would if you were just drawing in 2D. Because if you're drawing in 3D, essentially what's happening is you are not segmenting one slice at a time, but multiple slices, as would be covered via the sphere. All right. The next thing, and probably the most important part of this, is the gray value interval. Now, what I'll show you I mean by this is at the moment, I have no gray value interval highlighted. But remember in our previous video, I talked about how each element or each scan will have a certain gray value. Well, what we want to do to ensure that our segmentation only targets the parts of the anatomy that we're interested in, i.e. bone and not air, is we have to set a gray value interval. So if I control click on the bone here, you will notice that at the bottom left-hand corner, it gives me this number. It says 65,535. Now that is the gray value for this particular portion of the bone. That's the higher end of the gray value. So it's the most dense region. It's also the brightest region. If I click the air here, you can see that it now says 15,915. So that is the gray value of the air. Now we will not want to segment that portion of the scan. What we're going to want to do instead is figure out what the range of gray values is for the bone in this case and enter that in the gray value interval. So in this case, I'm going to click some of the kind of lighter areas of the bone here. As you can see, control click, and you can see now in this kind of lighter gray portion of the bone, I've got a gray value of 30,237. And I can do this as kind of all around. I can survey the bone just to see how that gray value number might change. As you can see, while I'm moving the navigation cursor through the element, it's giving me different numbers, as low as 23,000. But that 23,000 is actually coming from this empty space here. So I don't really want that. But if I click over here, you can also zoom in as close as possible, get these kind of marginal areas. You can see, again, that marginal area is 35,000, and over here it's 65,000. So what I'm going to do is create a gray value interval of about 30,000 up to 65,535, because that's my maximum value. So you do have to do this for every single specimen that you are interested in segmenting. Now, what I will show you will happen here is when I start segmenting, a new ROI will be created right here. And to segment, all you really have to do is click and drag. So in this case, you just click and drag, just kind of like Painter in Microsoft Paint used to be. It's the same sort of system. But you're doing this in 2D, and you will see your element come up in 3D, but you won't see it immediately. We'll show you how you can see that. So I'm going to go ahead and segment this section. I have my gray value interval set, and I'm going to click and drag. And you can see as I do that, and I'm working on this in the bottom left-hand 2D view, the element is being highlighted with a light blue outline. And as I do that, we can see in the other views, certain aspects of that bone or the matching area in the other planes is also being highlighted. All right, so I'm not doing anything to that other plane. It's just being highlighted right away. And now you can see over here under my volume 1 in my scene tree, there is now a sub-data set under regions of interest called region 1. Now, if I want to see that region in 3D, what I'm going to do is click on region 1, scroll down to my rendering tab, and you can see it says render settings not available when rendering disabled. What we need to do is click this V+, and that will create a 3D render of the area that I just segmented. Now, as you can see, I cannot see that yet here in my 3D screen. The reason being is that my isosurface, or my initial surface render, is still visible. So what I'm going to do is go back up to volume 1, where the whole data set is shown, scroll down again to my rendering tab, and I'm going to take the transparency there and make it, in this case, I'm going to make it 95%. And now you can see what's left is a portion of that humerus, so region 1, and that is my 3D segmentation from the data set as I've been working. So now you can see that's all that I've done so far. Now, if I go back to the element, now, as you can see, there's some parts of it here that are incomplete. I'm going to continue adding to it here using the draw tool. And just like that, that area is being added in. You can see that I missed some right over here. So I'm going to control click on that area where I've missed some. And you can see on the bottom left-hand screen in 2D that that area is now being filled in. And just like so, it has been filled in on the element there. Now, say you make a mistake, like down over here at the articulation with the all-in radius, I have a little mistake where you can see in the top right-hand 2D screen that some of the radius has actually been included in my humerus. Now, if that happens, all you need to do is hit Shift and then do your click and drag, and that will engage the eraser. And you can just erase that area. And so say I want to erase some portion of the middle here, I can just go ahead in any of my views and do that, and it's erased, just like so. Now, you may note that you will want to change the size of your painting tool. So sometimes you can do that either with going to the selection mode draw tab and increasing or decreasing it, or you can hold shift and then use your center scroll button if you have that to increase and decrease that spherical painting area. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this humerus. It won't take too long. You just have to be a little careful, and I like to work in one view as much as possible, and then switch over to the other views. So in this case, I'm just going to use this view down here at the bottom left, and just take me a moment. Scroll out. You can see I'm just clicking and I'm dragging, and it is filling in the element. And now here in this more complicated articular region, I've decreased the size of my painting tool. And over here, go ahead and do that too. So, and here you can see I've got a little mistake, so I'm just going to erase that. And I need to fill in this area. I'm not going to do necessarily a perfect job here, but I want to do enough so that I can show you all how to do this at home. Just going to finish that. That's there. The more of these you do, the faster you will get, but keep in mind that segmenting is a relatively time-consuming task. So it is rarely a very quick task. Now, obviously the draw tool, as you can tell, probably takes quite some time to segment a whole specimen, as you are being very careful and very accurate when you're using it. So it can take a long time to make your way through an entire specimen, especially if you're doing every single bone. However, it is the most accurate way to do this because you can control where your articulations are and things like that. You're not just sort of catching everything. As you can see, I've made a few little mistakes, and I'm able to remove those mistakes with a lot of accuracy as well. And just essentially, this is to an extent an art. You do have to sort of learn it, and you do have to have a good understanding of the anatomy of the specimen that you are looking at. So just going to finish up any empty spots here. And I think for now, that's going to be pretty good. I'm just going to blow this up so that you can see. It's not fully complete. There's a few little gaps in the element. But we can, if you spend a lot more time with it, you're going to have a better result here. So here you go. This is now the humerus of this particular specimen, or a nearly complete one. Now, of course, on my scene tree, it just says region 1. So what I want to do in this case is give it the name humerus so that I know, and I think this is the left humerus. So what I'll do is give this a right click, and I'm going to hit rename, and then under rename, I'm going to write left humerus. So now I know that that element is the left humerus, and if I want to turn it on or off, I just need to click the little check button there, and it will toggle it on or off. Now, another thing that you may want to do is apply some color to this particular element. So what we'll do is, being clicked on the left humerus, or this ROI, we will hit on this top bar. You can middle click, and a little ball will come up. And if you double click that little ball, you will get a color palette. You can then apply whatever color you want. I'm going to go ahead and make this a blue color. And blue, that. And now you can see that the specimen or the element has been colored. Now, as you can see, the color only applies to this particular point. So if we want to ensure that this specimen, or this element, sorry, is colored all the way through, we will click this other ball over here and give it the same color. And now you can see it has been colored all the way through. Now, if I take my rendering tool here and drag it either way, just like with the ISO surface, I can show the more or less dense portions of this element as well. And of course, if I drag this over here, you can see now everything shows up. including that little bit of white, which I can also make that blue if I wanted. And yeah, there we go. So I can, by sort of toggling the red line here, I can make this element more or less smooth as well, just for appearance's sake. All right, so that is essentially how the drawing tool works. You do have to take your time with the draw tool. As you can see, I've missed some sections. You can constantly go back and adjust things. It's a very powerful tool, and I quite like it a lot, actually. It is my go-to, as opposed to this next tool that I'm going to show you, which is called the region growing tool. So let's just go ahead and finish all these little gaps. So what's nice, actually, is once you've given some color to the region of interest, when you use the draw tool, that area is now fully labeled in that color. As you might see in a Viso or a Mira, if you've used those programs, it just kind of does this automatically. But what I like about VG as opposed to a Viso and a Mira is that it gives you a high quality 3D render immediately. All right, you don't have to do anything extra to kind of go back and forth between your label fields. It's immediately on screen. Yeah. So next, I'm just going to finish up this little section here. And so next now, let's go ahead and explore the other tool that I want to talk about in this particular segment, which is the region growing tool. So I've closed the draw tool by pressing the big X, and I'm going to the selection mode again under select. And now I'm going down to region grow. Now, if you've ever used let's say like Photoshop or something like that, region grow is akin to something like the magic wand. It is a catch-all tool, but if you're good with it, it can show you quite a lot. And it can be very powerful. And if you don't want a very accurate segmentation, it can actually make your segmentation go very, very quickly. So now I'm going to pick the ulna as the next element that I'm going to segment. And in this case now, I've gone ahead, I've clicked, and I've created the selection mode tool. So it's come up here in this new tab, similar to what the draw tool came up with. But this time, it's not giving us a grayscale value interval to work within. It's giving us something called a tolerance. And the tolerance, to my understanding, and if anyone from VG is watching this, you can probably correct me. The tolerance essentially is the number of pixels that will be included in the selection, plus or minus from the value of the pixel that you, from the grayscale value from the pixel that you selected. Basically what this means is, as you can see here, tolerance is 16,384. And that is in grayscale values. Now, if I control click somewhere on my 2D screen, you can see here I have 65,335 as my current value of grayscale. So if I were to click there, it would not only select that pixel to segment, but it would select all pixels in that that range, that 16,000 plus or minus range from the value of the pixel that I selected there, if that makes sense. And it kind of does this in a cascading pattern until it's decided all of the touching pixels together have been selected and put into the same region of interest. All right. Now, there's a few things you can do to sort of control this process. You can say avoid other visible ROIs. So for example, if I were to click and it were going to create this new region grown area of interest or region of interest, I could have it say avoid other visible regions of interest, so it would avoid my left humerus that I've already selected. So there's also a few different ways you can do this. There's static, dynamic, and adaptive. I'm actually not 100% certain what the differences are between these modes, so I usually just use static. And there are two ways to use the region grow tool, and I'm going to demonstrate them now. So first, there's just you create your region, you have the tolerance set to whatever you want here. I usually set it to something like 10,000 rather than 16,000. because 10,000 selects a few less pixels and is a little bit more accurate. But again, the region growing tool is a less accurate tool, in my opinion, than the drawing tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click this element here, which should be the ulna. Yep, it is the ulna. And I will click that. Now, with the region growing tool, here you go. You can see now everything has been highlighted in yellow. And this was actually a pretty good region grow. And as we can see here, it's done everything in yellow. Now, it gives me a couple options. Now that I've selected my region to grow, it's going to say these red squares have kind of come up. Now, the first one is create a new region of interest. So this, like the draw tool, will create a new data set, which will be our new region of interest. And if you're just starting a new element, that's the button that you're going to click here. So we're going to do that. The next one is replace. So you can replace some data fields in an existing region of interest. There's also effectively an add tool. So instead of creating a new region of interest, so say we went back to our humerus. If I wanted to add this selection to the humerus, I would have to be clicked on the humerus, and then I would say add. And then there is also a takeaway. So that is effectively the delete button. Now, in this case, because I want the ulna to be a separate element, I'm going to go ahead and click create new region of interest. And you can see here, under my scene tree, I now have a new region created. Now, something to be noteful is that, again, the render does not automatically come up. If I want to see that 3D model, I have to scroll down to rendering, and I have to click this B+. And now you can see that bone has sort of been highlighted. But one thing that's important is with every new region that you create, after your first one, or even on your first one, the transparency setting will automatically mirror that of the transparency of the overall volume. So remember how we made the overall volume 95% so that we could see the humerus? Now every new region that gets created will also have this transparency setting. So essentially what we're going to do is just make sure we're clicked on our new region. So in this case, it's been renamed region 1. We're going to scroll down to the rendering settings, and we're going to hit 0, or we're going to make the transparency 0 so that we can now see that bone. So here you go. Just like that, I have a mostly complete element here. Now you can see at the ends of the element, there are some areas that have not been fully rendered. So if you wanted to go really quickly and create, a segmentation fast, just to get a rough idea of what the specimen could look like when elements have been segmented out, you can use the region growing tool. And you can actually use the region growing tool a second way too, and we're going to go into that to sort of fill in these gaps. So you can see here, we already now have our ulna. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to have it differentiated, so I'm going to give it a new color. In this case, I'm just going to make it red. And there we have it. So now the ulna has been made red. But you can see when I look in 2D view, a lot of these kind of marginal regions have not been included in my segmentation. So what I can do is I can actually just click that area, and hopefully it will, yeah. So now this is what can occasionally happen. It has over selected. So you can see here, rather than just stay within the ulna, the region grow tool has actually gone ahead and selected the fingers and the radius as well. So if I were to go and click add, which would add this new selection to my ulna, it would now include the ulna or the radius and the hand and all that stuff, which I don't necessarily want. And this is where the sort of lower accuracy of the region grow tool comes into play when compared to the draw tool. The draw tool, I am controlling what I want in my segmentation, whereas the region growing tool is sort of saying, well, these pixels are touching each other. They are probably part of the same. You're essentially allowing the computer to decide those things. And in some cases, that can be very powerful. In other cases, not so much. So here, I'm going to go ahead and show you what it'll look like now. So when I click add, it's gone ahead and added all of these other elements, and not that accurately, I have to say. You can see we're missing a few fingers. So I'm just going to click Control Z, couple times until it takes me back, and now that selection is done. Now say I want to still use the region grow tool, but kind of control it a little more. There's a couple things I can do. I can decrease my tolerance, so I can maybe take this down, say to 5,000, and see if the decreased tolerance and then clicking in the same spot as I did before, whether that will give me a better, so you can see now it's actually only made a very small selection here. Maybe I'll go over to the brighter area. Again, it's made a very small selection. So by going down from 10,000 to 5,000, it's actually really reduced the area that it's selecting. And again, now it's still just selecting a small area when I've gone down to 8,000. So I like to keep it at 10,000. I'm going to keep it at 10,000. And you can see as soon as I bump that up, it's gone back to that same old selection. So how do we solve this using the region growing tool? We can, rather than just clicking and allowing the computer to figure it out, if we click on a pixel and then drag, you will see in the bottom left-hand screen a kind of circular area being created. That is now a sub-selection of the area in which I want it to do the region grow. So essentially, when I click and drag, I'm telling the computer only region grow within this sphere. So now you can see as I click and drag, it is creating a sort of a sub-selection there of the region grow to show you here. So now that I've done that, okay, like there's a bit of area there that I want added. I'm going to go ahead and click add, and that's going to add that to number 1 there. But I want to fill in this gap right over here that you can see. Here. And I'm going to do that with this sort of round tool. So I can just keep going like this, click, drag, create a round tool, and then click, drag, create a round tool. And you can see it's slowly filling that gap in. Personally, I would rather use the draw tool because I think it's more efficient for this sort of a task. It'll just go a lot faster. If you want to do it like this. The region grow tool, really, it's the tool that you want to use rapidly or to sort of give yourself some sense of what's happening very quickly with the element. Now, of course, we don't have to just stick to a single tool when segmenting any one particular element. So as you can see, as I've said, the region grow, this is probably the best strategy if you've got a good scan, is to use the region grow with the drawing tool. What I mean by that is you can use the region grow to kind of segment the majority of the specimen or the element that you're looking at out, and then switch from that. So we'll close the region growing tool, and we're going to go select draw, and then hit draw again, and then make sure that we are selecting the ROI that we're interested in. We can adjust the gray value interval, so we're going to look again. This element should have a pretty similar grayscale value interval to that of the other element. But now what I'm going to do, again, making sure I'm clicked on the correct ROI, I'm going to use my draw tool, and I'm going to fill in that unfilled area pretty quickly here. You can see. Now, one thing that has probably happened is we'll have to adjust the rendering settings. So here you can see using the draw tool, I'm just getting this all done. Here. Yeah, okay. So we can see I have added those pixels, even though it's currently showing up as a whole, those pixels have been added. What we need to do now is go down to our rendering screen. As you can see, the histogram has gotten a little messed up. We're going to have to remove some of these color points here to do that. They do get created automatically sometimes when you use the two tools in unison. So we're going to just remove them by right-clicking and then clicking remove, click, remove, click, remove. So now what you can see is I'm going to go ahead and move the rendering line over, and it's now filling in the bone. And then I'm going to move my color over with it as well. And so what's happened here is that because I use two different tools, the rendering histogram has kind of a range of values, and it's trying to figure out what they are. So sometimes you will have to adjust this particular tab here. All right, and so now you can see that since I've used the drawing tool to fill in those gaps, the bone is now more complete. Now, if you were doing this, you could do it pretty quickly, actually, using the two tools together. So if you wanted to use just the ROI tool the region grow tool to kind of get a quick sense of what the element looks like, and then use the draw tool to sort of fill in those gaps and fill in the rest of the surface, you can do that. And it will allow you to go pretty quickly, and you can sort of zoom out a little bit. You can change the size of the ball here and then quickly do that and just fill in any gaps that might have been created from the region growing tool. So, and again, there's a few little quirks that have to get worked out as you go. For example, with the draw tool, if you make the ball a little too big, it will over select some areas. So there's pros and cons to both, but you can see pretty quickly here we have segmented the humerus and the ulna, and I will go ahead and rename the ulna. There you have it. So you can go through and do this for every single element until you have all the bones that you're interested in highlighted. And I'll show you what this can eventually look like here. So I will show you this particular specimen. This is a snake that I did. Now, if you were to do this process through the entire specimen, whatever your scan may be, you will be able to see every single element highlighted out like so. You can see this is a snake skull where I've gone through and segmented each bone out. So for volume graphics, you really want to be using the drawing tool and the region growing tool. It's kind of up to you which one you decide works better for your particular workflow. Using a combination of the two will be really good, and it will allow you to move quickly through the specimen. And yeah, you should experiment around with it. It will work out. It does take some time though, but you will have to sort of figure out which tool you are more interested in. So that brings us to the end of our introduction to volume graphics tools. Now, in my next video, I am planning on showing you a little bit more of how to use volume graphics tools for doing some analysis once you have done some segmenting, because you can look at certain things like the surface area, the bone volume, and things like that. And you can take a few light measurements, but we're going to do that in another video. This was just an introduction to the region growing tool and the drawing tool in volume graphics. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to send me an email to the address that you see on screen. And thank you again for watching, and please keep an eye out for our next video.